Hi, welcome to Plato's Cave, your speakeasy for ideas, where Tom and Dave show us how to think like the American founders. Grab a drink if you'd like. The conversation about saving our republic is about to begin.
Happy 100, Dave.
Can you believe it's our centennial?
This is the 100th episode. I was going to say 100th episode of Plato's Cave, but we sort of branded that name kind of midway through. But our podcast that we've been doing together, this is the 100th episode, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we've missed a week. I think you and I have either in person together or remotely, we have produced one a week for the last 100 weeks.
We have not missed a week. We did do 2 total. So we were 98%. We had 2 total that either I was not on or you were not on. There was one you were sick for one, and Cody Wisniewski filled in for you. Just a little side note on that. Cody and I will be actually starting a second podcast for the Vino Veritas Society.
Yeah. It's exciting
coming
stuff
up next week, where we're going to focus a little bit more on some of the current events, the things they're talking about on the news, the things that we don't necessarily have the time for on this podcast to talk about and get into the philosophical underpinnings of which is where your time is best spent. So Cody and I decided we would jump into some of the more modern stuff. So Cody and I have that starting next week, but there was the one episode where he did that. And then there was one episode where when I had COVID.
Oh, I think I went solo.
You went solo. And I was sitting there and I was watching the whole thing on my computer. I was recording the whole thing when I couldn't get off of my couch for 2 weeks with what I thought at the time was stomach flu. And turned out to be COVID.
Yep. Well, here we are. So I think that puts us back somewhere around May of 2020. We started this. It's a really good, it's a good feeling. 100 podcasts under our belt. It's a big achievement. Kudos to us.
It really is. I will say this: we made it a whole lot longer than CNN Plus.
Hey, yes, we did.
And we spent a whole lot less money than they did. Did everybody see this? That the $300 million that CNN Plus put into that CNN put into their streaming service. That lasted a total of 4 weeks and signed up a total of 10,000 subscribers. It's interesting, and this will be another conversation for another time, but we have talked in the past. Some of the credit I give to the McMahons, Vince and Linda McMahon from professional wrestling, to teaching Trump how to create audience and how to build audience and what they went through when they launched their streaming service. Everybody, I think, knows at this point, if they've been watching more than a few episodes or even all 100, I followed that pretty closely from a stock standpoint when it went public. And this was really early. This was actually mid 2015, I think, that WWE went public and made their initial public offering. And I followed Vince and Linda McMahon as they were trying to give that a go. And what was interesting was they projected nearly 1 million subscribers in the first quarter, maybe 750,000. They ended up at 75,000. So they still did better than CNN Plus, but it wasn't a huge success.
Way off their mark.
They, on the other hand, instead of giving up and realizing they had no audience, they realized they just had to teach their audience something different. And as they did that, all of a sudden, this whole thing started to come together. And now they were up over the millions before NBC came along and essentially bought their streaming service and moved it over to Peacock. We, along with the WWE, have done much better than CNN Plus in terms of subscribers and growth.
Well, and the world is soon going to see if Mr. Elon Musk can make a success out of Twitter.
Speaking of initial public offerings,
tell me this, Dave. You have a extensive business background, marketing, branding. Was that a good business move? Elon Musk is a very wealthy, the wealthiest man in the world, I believe. Is that going to make him wealthier, or is he going to end up losing money? Is this a losing financial proposition?
If I was solely a business advisor to Musk and it was not about anything else, I would have told him this was a huge mistake. I don't think that there's a future for Twitter. I don't think there was a future for Twitter when it was being run by progressive leftists, and it was a microphone for the left. It was essentially 10 years of CNN plus.
Correct me here, just on the business side of this. Correct me if I'm wrong. Within the past year, I think something like 9-10 months ago, stocks in Twitter had gone up around the $70 mark. I think was sort of their high water mark.
Yep.
And then that price had come down significantly, somewhere around $30 when Elon Musk bought, what did he buy, 9%, 9.5% here
Correct.
recently. And then, of course, that purchase, it's interesting, right? How, I mean, the market is psychology, right? So what happens when a guy like Musk starts buying up a bunch of shares? The market says, woo, this must be valuable. And the price of those shares went up. But the final price they agreed on was
$54.20. Remember last week we talked all about Musk's obsession with $4.20.
Right. So higher than the price when he bought his at 9%, but lower than their high water mark. I mean, one has to assume that board sat there and thought, well, I don't know what maybe they were thinking there's really no future for Twitter, and we're never going to get back to this price again. And so let's just sell it, call it a day, and see what he does with it.
Well, and there was that for them. Although we talked about last week, the board of Twitter really had no financial stake in Twitter.
How about shareholders? Is this? I haven't heard many people talking about that. This whole sale to Elon Musk, is this good for ordinary shareholders in Twitter?
Yes. It's hard to argue that it's not. Now, the board of Twitter was trying to. And I think they did explore, is this a good deal for our shareholders? Can we justify? I don't think they wanted to sell. I think they made that pretty obvious. Nobody ever came out and said it, but I don't think they wanted to sell. Did
they not want to sell, or did they not want to sell to Elon Musk?
I don't think they wanted to sell.
Period.
Okay. Mainly because, like we talked about last night, there were crony deals happening. There were benefits of using Twitter and leveraging Twitter for different people, whether they were government or other large institutional investors. There were benefits available to them that they were leveraging Twitter for. The idea of selling it and potentially losing their board seat gave that opportunity to, or created that opportunity where they would give that up, and they didn't have any financial interest in it. We talked about last week, the entire board owned less than 0.25% of the company. Right. So I don't think they wanted to sell at all. If they did want to sell, it would have been to somebody who would have kept them on board. Now, the problem is as a board member of a publicly traded company, or any company for that matter, you have a fiduciary duty to your shareholders, which means if your shareholders determine that you are not acting in their best financial interest, they have the ability to sue you. And I think that board realized pretty quickly here that there was no way for them to justify in court that they thought the price was ever going to get back up to $54.20.
Yeah. And
if that's not the case, then they have a fiduciary duty to sell. And I think they knew, if we don't do this, we're going to be in trouble. Yeah. Now, what was interesting about it to me was, we talked last week a lot about the institutional investors and how I thought they were going to be the roadblock for Elon Musk.
Right.
And you know, this is one of those times that he just shows his intelligence. He shows his understanding of things. And sometimes he pushes the boundaries. And there was the time where he was saying, I'm going to take Tesla private, funding secure, but he wouldn't disclose who the funding was from. And he got in trouble with the SEC. In this case, he went to Goldman, who was already a large institutional investor. And he says, hey, I need a loan from you. He is the wealthiest man on the planet, $220 billion in wealth, but that's not liquid, right? He's not sitting there on a pile of cash like Scrooge McDuck, like the left would like to pretend. And this is a really important thing, right? The left would like to pretend that all these billionaires are sitting in their mansions on piles of cash,
swimming in cash,
swimming in their vaults of their money.
Yeah.
And the reality is almost all of Musk's money is tied up in Tesla, in SpaceX, in Solar City, in Starlink, in all of these companies. He's getting everything from there, or everything's there. So he had to go to Goldman and he had to say, look, I have collateral, but I need a loan. I need capital to go do this. And I will keep you guys involved in this if you do it. And I think that was probably the smartest move he could have made.
Right.
So, we watch how this whole thing went down. They had this fiduciary duty. I think they knew they were going to get sued if they didn't accept it. I still believe that this isn't over. I still believe that they are hoping that the SEC is going to come along and say, we have some concerns about this.
Yeah.
SEC always seems to stick their nose in whenever any kind of big deal gets done.
Yeah.
We saw how long it took the T-Mobile Sprint merger to happen. It took 2 or 3 years before the SEC finally said, okay, you guys have given up enough other parts of your business where we can allow this merger to happen.
Well, of course, Dave, you can't just have citizens coming to an agreement on a trade, right? You need some bureaucrats from the SEC offering oversight and opinions.
And if there really is cronyism going on, it will be interesting to see how the SEC does respond to this. I mean, they have, I think, another week or so to really put together a decision. And there were some people who I do follow on Twitter, who are some of the more respected attorneys in this area, who are saying up next is Elon Musk v. United States government and the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Well, and so looking at this sale, this transaction, assuming it goes forward, give us kind of a breakdown. What are some of the good parts? Are there things we should appreciate, should value? Or is there a downside to this whole thing?
If you did the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And then I have some questions, and those are things.
That was a great
movie. Clint Eastwood.
Clint Eastwood. Yeah, that's right. Yes,
phenomenal movie. The good. We talked a little bit last week, I believe, about this is not necessarily, at least in my view, a free speech issue. We have had people nonstop on television saying this was a victory for free speech. Nobody's free speech was being prevented. It was actually interesting. I went to a Federalist Society lunch last week, just same day as our podcast came out, and was speaking to an attorney.
For those who might not be familiar with the Federalist Society, this is an organization was really created during Ronald Reagan's day and by some of the legal minds. Most prominently Robert Bork, after that whole episode when he was nominated for the Supreme Court and the big controversial confirmation hearings and several others, formed the Federal Society. And its whole purpose is to be an organization for conservative or constitutionalists, those who kind of lean towards originalism, and mainly lawyers and judges. Primarily, that's who belongs to the Federal Society.
Right. So I, along with 2 of our other members, decided to attend. There actually might have been a few other people there who are actually members of the Vino Veritas Society.
Well, we are taking over the world. So you go to almost any event today and we see members of the Vino Veritas Society.
There you go. And I did get asked several questions from people of, I know the Vino Veritas Society. I want to join. Where's a chapter near me? So that was exciting. But I went with 2 of our members. We all signed up together and we went. And the speaker was an attorney who worked for Josh Hawley, who I believe is from Missouri, but I'm not positive on he's somewhere in the Midwest. And this attorney was making the case for regulation of big tech companies.
Right.
I pushed back a little bit. Did not feel like he was being an originalist. Did not feel like he was.
I'm curious. Did he use the phrase openly of common good originalism or common good constitutional? Did he claim that his argument about regulating tech companies is part of that common good jurisprudence?
Not until Q&A when we called him out for it.
Okay. And did he agree? Did
yes.
he say, that I am part of that cabal, that school of thought?
And that should be a podcast for another time. That's a huge conversation.
Yeah.
But an important one. But he was making the case that we should be regulating these things. I bring this up because when we're talking about the good, when we're talking about the good that came out of this shows that government regulation isn't always necessary. We might want things to happen quickly, and therefore our instinct is government, go regulate this because we want this to happen now. But capitalism wins in the end. If you just let markets do their thing, somebody like Elon Musk is going to come along and say, we need an open conversation.
Well, there's something to be said there about the way a capitalist when I use that word, I mean people like us. I'm a capitalist. You're a capitalist. The way a capitalist views problems is just strikingly different than the way a progressive views problems. And it's curious when these kinds of subjects come up, many people who think they're conservative, call themselves conservative, they really start showing their progressive colors because, a business like Twitter goes out there and, they're engaged in some political hackery. There's no doubt about it, right? They're basically providing a big megaphone for progressives, and they're silencing and harassing conservatives. No question. What's interesting is how we respond. It's the progressive mentality that says, well, we got to regulate them. That's the solution, is to go regulate them. And freedom people like us, we're always saying, no.
Yeah.
We don't need regulation. You have multiple options. Number one, if you don't like, say it's Twitter, you don't like what Twitter, then don't participate. No one's forcing you to participate. You don't have to. Another option, go start something else. Go make something better. If you think that product or that service is really defective and bad, make something better, or go buy it.
Right.
Don't regulate it. Elon Musk is showing the world, you want to change something, just go buy it.
Yeah. So, and obviously we all can't just go buy Twitter, but there are solutions, and there are people out there who, when we bring our resources together as a community, you can do interesting things. The other reason I brought up this conversation with Josh Hawley's staffer, and I don't know if I call him an attorney or a staffer. He is an attorney who works on his staff.
Yeah.
He kept bringing this up as a free speech issue. He wanted to regulate it because he said this is a violation of people's free speech. And the reality is it's not. Like you said, if you don't, nobody has a right to participate in Twitter. And as long as you can still walk outside and go walk up to somebody and say all the things you want to say, as long as you can still respond to somebody in another forum, in another method, in another means, there's really nobody preventing free speech, even former President Trump, right?
Here, let's just give an example to make this point really clear. Suppose I invest my own money and I build a literal megaphone. You got to hold the thing up, and it's a big megaphone, right? And it's going to echo for blocks and blocks away. And I speak into this megaphone so that everyone for a 10-mile radius can hear me. And you come over and say, hey, Tom, that looks like a pretty cool megaphone. May I say some things in there? And I say, nah, Dave, I don't want you to speak into my megaphone.
Yep.
Have I violated your free speech rights? No. You're still perfectly free to say anything you want to anyone. I'm just saying.
Or go buy your own megaphone.
Yeah, right. You can go build a megaphone, buy a megaphone, borrow one from someone else. I'm just saying you don't get to use my megaphone, but that's not restricting or violating your free speech rights.
Right. So, and that's where this gets into the difference between a free speech issue, and I don't think this was any great victory for freedom of speech. We still have freedom of speech in this country. We a lot of times like to think that the world is trying to conspire against conservatives and freedom voices, and it is in a lot of ways, and conservative voices don't necessarily have as many mechanisms when things like Twitter are blocking and things like Facebook are blocking. And that is a problem. And we should try to find market solutions to deal with those. But this wasn't a free market problem. What this was a problem was the pursuit of truth. And Elon Musk buying this and the things he intends to do with Twitter, talking about giving people that platform, creating a better flow and exchange of ideas, debate, argument, things along those lines, by doing things like forcing people or creating processes where people on his platform have to use their real name. So if you're going to be on there, you've got to be able to say something and know that you might say something that's going to make somebody angry and somebody's going to come do something about it.
For people who have been following the story in detail, that is one of his ideas, right? To reform and improve Twitter and get rid of all the fake accounts and people who hide behind fake names. And it is some kind of verification process. I don't think we know yet what that would look like, but he's saying that is his goal, to get to a place where you got to verify that you're a real person and then use your real actual name. That alone, think of how that changes, right? When your name is attached, your actual real name, and everybody can see it, that might cause, some people to moderate what they do on Twitter.
Right. I mean, the keyboard warrior attitude, all of a sudden people start thinking twice. The best example, I think a lot of people saw the video last week of Mike Tyson, and we're not going to get into today. We don't have the time, and I don't have the interest in getting into whether Mike Tyson was right, but there was a guy who was on an airplane sitting behind Mike Tyson who decided to keep standing up and just harassing him, giving him a hard time. I think he was looking for a problem, and he talked until finally Mike Tyson turned around and clocked him. I don't want to get hit by Mike Tyson, but Mike Tyson's comment afterward was, quick side note on that. I know I do this all the time. Did you see the video of Mike Tyson talking about what happened?
No.
Did you see the?
I saw the video of him turning around in his seat and wailing on the guy.
Did you see so you didn't see the video or the picture? When Mike Tyson was asked about it, he was holding a book. It was Thomas Sowell.
Oh, yeah, yes, I did see that. Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Mike Tyson is learning about economics from Thomas Sowell.
Yeah.
Mine just blew when I saw this.
Yeah.
But Mike Tyson turns around and he says, he said, look, we now live in a society where people think they can get away with anything they want, say whatever they want, do whatever they want with no repercussions. And sometimes people just need to get punched in the face. There's God, I want to agree with him so badly. And he's so right about the mentality. We can discuss whether or not somebody should be allowed to punch somebody for saying something. The whole sticks and stones thing. But he's right in that we do live in this society where people like to run their mouths. And I think when you have to put your name on something, when you have to back it up, it's a totally different circumstance.
Yeah, I agree.
So the good is we're going to pursue truth. And I say that because that goes back to Thomas Jefferson, right? There's the Thomas Jefferson quote that where he talks about the truth's best defense is the ability to debate and argue.
Yeah, what he calls her, this is an old literary device referring to truth as a woman, assuming we know what a woman is. But what he writes in there is truth is great, and she can defend herself as long as she has her natural weapons, which are free speech and open debate. Let people talk. And then if somebody wants to float a falsehood, float a lie, let them try, and let everyone else analyze it, ask questions, debate, discuss it, and those lies will be revealed for what they are eventually.
Maybe Musk in this whole thing to really go after the keyboard warriors will install something on your computer where if you do anything that really is over the line, it'll zap you or something like that. Give you that punch in the face somehow. Yeah. No, it's just really absurd where Twitter has gotten. I look through the comments right now. The absurdity of what people are saying is just crazy to me. But to me, that is the good thing. We're going to get this new pursuit of truth. We're going to get this new ability to have open debate and everything else. Now, that all depends on the business decision you asked me about earlier. I'm going to get to that in a few minutes when we get to the bad.
Yeah.
But we do have, if we do have this open conversation available on Twitter again, I think that's a win for truth, and that's a really good thing. I've been trying to use the word, maybe this helps some of our members, maybe you want to adopt this too, instead of saying that conservatives have been silenced, because they haven't been silenced, right? They haven't been silenced entirely. I've been using the term muted. Conservatives on Twitter have been muted, right? And so you can go away, you can go use a different platform and have your voice again. But on Twitter itself, conservatives were muted. And I've been using that as opposed to silenced.
Well, and going back to the metaphor of the megaphone I was just using, if you have a large population of people and there's a digital platform that they can communicate, and you make the voices of many quieter, you're restricting them, kicking them off, whatever it is, the effect for observers, it's the same as if you're turning up the volume for those who are who get to speak.
Right.
And so really what Twitter has been a kind of megaphone for progressives. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say there are no conservatives on Twitter. There are. It's just the more influential you are as a conservative, the bigger your audience, the more likely you are to be muted, to be kicked off, right? Something nefarious goes on with your account.
And look no further when you talk about that megaphone and then the amplification, right? So you have that megaphone. It's one thing to have a megaphone. It's another thing if that megaphone is plugged into an amp, into these huge speakers that are really getting out there. That amplification has been the media. And what has driven me nuts about the left progressive media, the MSNBCs, the CNNs,
right,
is that you can tell very, very clearly that the vast majority of them, I won't say all of them, but the vast majority, especially like the ladies on The View, they're just looking at Twitter to find their talking points. Nobody's actually coming up with their own ideas. Nobody's actually going out and reading anything or learning anything. They go on Twitter every day and they say, oh, this person's talking about this and this person's talking about this, and there's no pushback. This should be an easy thing for us to talk about.
Yeah.
And they don't even see what the counterpoint is. So they assume, okay, now we must be right. And then they go out and they use it, and that becomes the amplification. This will change the media's approach to the use of Twitter. The bigger thing, and I think the biggest good that is going to come out of this is we are going to see, for those who saw this, one of the first directives that was passed down and upon the acceptance of the deal was the entire system, the entire servers, all of the code had to be locked down. And only certain people were given access to it. And it was being monitored and everything else because they didn't want anybody doing anything nefarious to the code to blow up Twitter on their way out, right? You are going to see a vast majority of employees quitting over the next several weeks.
Imagine the people who would have an interest right now in bribing the security guards,
sure,
whoever it is, right? Who's standing there by the door saying, "No, these are the servers for Twitter. You don't get to go in there." Well, I guarantee you, there are some corrupt cronies who would love to get into that room full of servers and wipe them clean.
That's one of my questions in all of this. Goldman was so anxious to jump in with Musk, and I made the comment last week that I believe the institutional investors in Twitter had crony dealings going on. And that makes me wonder, is Goldman's involvement here in an interest in protecting their own interests?
It would not surprise me at all if the security guards worked for Goldman.
At some point in their career.
They come in, they say, sure, Elon, we'll team up with you. We'll put in 20 billion. And, but we get to put our guys, controlling the security.
So here's the good part. That all got locked down.
Yeah.
All of the data from the last 10 years is still in those servers. Musk will have a team, there is no doubt about it, go in and analyze what were the algorithms that were determining who to shut down, how to shut them down.
Right.
Was there shadow banning going on? All of that, all of those little intricate technologies. We've already heard that many conservatives who were arguing I've been shadow banned, Larry Elder has been on this for the last 24 hours, for example. His numbers had been dwindling every month, his number of followers slowly dwindling every month. And he never understood why. Remember, Larry Elder ran for governor of California last year in a special election and came just short. Now, all of a sudden, his followers on Twitter overnight skyrocketed. All of those shadow bans. So that does mean that people are trying to eliminate code. Despite the lockdown, they are deleting code that was shadow banning people. We now know this as fact. What I'm even more curious about is there going to be evidence found of members of our government, whether it's the bureaucracy or Congress or the executive branch, ordering or requesting Twitter to silence people?
What?
On their...
Dave... You're suggesting people in the government would be working with a private company for political gain?
Remember last week we did talk about a board member who's in charge of public-private partnerships for MasterCard.
That's right.
Right. So there is something there. We don't know what. We might never know. It might have been erased pending all of this, right? I mean, let's remember the Twitter board took several days to make this deal happen. A lot could have happened to the servers in that time period.
I don't mean to put you on the spot here if you don't know the answer. Just tell me, do you, I don't know this. Do you know the timeline of exactly how all this is supposed to unfold? When does Elon Musk actually get control of this company?
There is an SEC process, a Securities and Exchange Commission process.
Okay.
This has to go through and it's really...
kind of up to them.
It's going to determine if they decide there's a problem here. If they decide we don't think that this deal should happen, if they think something needs to be stopped along the way or needs to be examined or explored, they can go in and hold this up. And it's very likely we will see Elon Musk versus the United States government or versus the SEC in court trying to finalize this thing. But in the interest of shareholders, and because this isn't a merger between two public companies, which is really where the SEC gets involved because they try to talk about monopoly laws and antitrust and things like that, this is going to it's a lot harder to say, oh, this guy's taking this company private. It takes a lot of the SEC's role out of it, but that doesn't mean they can't do something to try to stop it.
So you've just trotted out one good thing after another here. Sounds like this is a win-win-win thing. In your mind, are there downsides to this?
As I said earlier, I think this is a bad business move. And I think this is a bad business move for a few reasons. One, I still think Twitter is a cesspool. I still think Twitter is the playground. As 5-year-olds on the playground, a bunch of people running around, even if you have to put your name on it, saying anything they want, saying whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want, because there is still that gap. You're right. You're still that keyboard warrior. Yeah. You're not looking somebody in the eye like this guy who was harassing Mike Tyson. And at the end of the day, I don't see the advertising coming in and actually making this a good business move for Musk. I don't see how exclusively, if you look at Twitter in a vacuum, look at Fox versus CNN as the perfect example. Fox's viewership is significantly larger. Some reports are more than double the size of CNN's viewership. The revenue isn't that different. And the reason is because Nike and Disney and all of these major companies are willing to spend a lot of money to keep CNN going.
Right. All those woke companies. Right. They're not going to advertise with a conservative network like Fox. They will go advertise with CNN.
And because of the way that Musk has been portrayed, it's a question of how does he make revenue? And what's interesting, real quick, before you ask your question, what's really interesting to me about it is if you look at the companies that are being successful in the conservative arena, it's all subscriber based like we are. Right. It is all subscriber based. You look at somebody like the Daily Wire, you look at somebody like Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan isn't making a fortune on advertising on Spotify.
Right.
Spotify is leveraging Joe Rogan. They're paying him a lot of money to get more people onto their platform. And then they're getting the advertisers on other shows. Now, we are seeing a bit of a shift. I think there was big news last week that the Obama's podcast, Michelle and Barack Obama had their own podcast. Spotify dropped it last week and said, we're not going to carry it anymore. And they're looking for a new home. But I think the model for Spotify was, let's use Joe Rogan to get people on. And then we can say to our advertisers, look how many subscribers, look how many users we have. You should advertise and we can put them on these shows and things like that.
Yeah. One of the big 800-pound gorilla questions in the room here, Dave, is as this whole thing has unfolded, Elon Musk has gone from being something of a darling or an angel or a saint, a savior of sorts for progressives. I mean, they said, Elon Musk, he makes electric cars, man. He cares about the earth, right? And so he's gone from this status of like archangel to just the most devilish of demons. I mean, in a very short period of time here, progressives have turned on him as the embodiment of everything that is evil and bad and ruinous in the world. And yet there's a lot we really don't know about Elon Musk. It is not correct to say Elon Musk is for example, is a big Trumpster.
No.
I mean, that's not right. He's not a big Trumpster. I suppose if you were to describe him, he likely is something like a small L libertarian, kind of a guy who appears to believe in freedom, individual liberty, free markets, less regulation. It seems to be, but he's really kept his political, philosophic views for the most part kind of close. Those cards close to his chest. It's hard to read him, and so which is one of the reasons it's so strange that out there in the mainstream media, I mean, he used to be praised to high heaven when he probably didn't deserve that from progressives. And now he's being, just besmirched, and they're just saying all kinds of nasty things about him.
The way that they're responding, and it just continues to show the complete and total hypocrisy of the left. The one thing I love about Twitter is these tweets never go away. You post something, you can't edit it, you can't change, right? There's no edit button on Twitter.
Our members probably know this. I don't use Twitter much. I don't look at it much. Every now and then I'll send out a little tweet, not very often. The whole thing just seemed kind of overwhelming to me. I'm actually learning this for the first time. Is there not a way to delete a tweet?
There is, but once something's out on the internet, it's there forever. And there's this really great website called the Wayback Machine, and you can actually pull a website. And if you have the URL, if you've saved URLs, and there's a lot of organizations that are out there doing this on a regular basis. They are saving URLs, and you can use this thing called the Wayback Machine to say, I want to see what this URL looked like on this date in 2005 or 2012 or 2017.
So if I had posted a tweet that day and later deleted it, it's
still there. As long as you still have the URL where it exists.
Yeah.
And so if somebody had retweeted something, right, and then it's gone, there's ways to go back into the code and find what was the URL that I retweeted that is no longer there, and go back and find it. When you post something on Twitter, you might delete it, but it's never gone. And so people are now showing these posts, and I think it was Robert Rich who wrote something about REICH, not anybody related to me, who wrote something about how proud he was when Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post.
Oh, yes.
And he was going on and on, just gushing about how amazing it is that Jeff Bezos is now going to own the Washington Post and help it and save it and all of these things. And then just last week saying, it is a travesty in America when a billionaire can buy a media company.
That same guy was tweeting a year and a half ago about saying, well, now Donald Trump is suing Twitter and Facebook for kicking him off. Donald Trump needs to learn these are private companies, and they can decide who's welcome on their platform and who not. And now that same guy is out there tweeting today, Twitter is this important public space. Curiously, and you're right, this is a topic for another conversation, but those progressives, to their view of social media today as a kind of public forum that should be available to everyone, regulated in the public interest, they actually have a lot in common with conservative, what do they call it? Common good
originalists.
Originalists. So they're both kind of on the same platform of how they're looking at social media.
Right. So I think the bad here is, one, I just don't see this as a viable long-term business. Now, the question is, what is Musk's ultimate goal? He has enough money, and Twitter does turn enough of a revenue at least to just float itself. And as long as Musk doesn't need to make money off of this, the fact that he's taking it private means he doesn't have obligations to shareholders anymore to pay dividends, to increase the stock, all of those things. There are no more shareholders out there, right? It's him and his lenders. And as long as he's paying his bills, his interests and everything else that he owes, whether it's to Goldman or anybody else, he doesn't have an obligation to anybody that Twitter actually has to turn a significant profit. So as long as Twitter can maintain, and they do make enough money to maintain this, they're just not making the hundreds of billions that Facebook or Instagram or some of the others are earning. So he could use it for that. And then the question to me becomes, what does he use it for? Twitter could become an unbelievable platform to help him grow other businesses that he's doing. And my suspicion is, do I think this was a good, that's why I said earlier, is this in a vacuum? I don't like this as a deal. But when you look at the whole thing, his ability to promote SolarCity, his ability to promote Tesla, his ability to promote other things, it's actually very surprising to me to see. We saw this week, Tesla's stock has been plummeting upon news of the deal. And I think this becomes a great opportunity to grow Tesla and to promote Tesla and to cross promote his other businesses. So there is that. I do though wonder, he's doing a lot of really impressive things, and he's an amazing innovator. He's doing a lot of other important things, and I do wonder if this was the best use of $43 billion.
Yeah.
$43.5 billion.
Economists have a concept, opportunity cost, which is it's an important concept. It also should give pause to anytime anyone suggests something is free, nothing's really free. And one of the reasons is that there's always opportunity cost to do anything, anything. Even if something that doesn't actually cost money, there's still, if you're going to spend your time and energy doing one thing, well, that means you're not spending your time and money doing lots of other things, right? What did you give up in order to go do the thing that you did? And in terms of that opportunity cost, here we're talking tens of billions of dollars.
Yep.
What could he have done with that money other than purchase Twitter? And was there something more productive, of more value,
and more productive towards his goal of free, open conversation? I'm not going to talk about free speech, but open conversation. And from that perspective, my guess is Bezos would never have agreed to a number, but I would have loved to see what would have happened if he would have gone after Amazon Web Services. Amazon Web Services, if you remember, is the reason that Parler couldn't survive, or that Parler got shut down. I mean, yes, the Apple Store and the Google Play Store were saying we're not going to list you, but it was their servers that were causing the problem.
Explain that for our members who may not know. What exactly, what does Amazon Web Services do?
Those are the servers that host Twitter, that host many other websites. And it's a private business. It's owned by Jeff Bezos. It's part of the Amazon business. It's actually their largest revenue provider.
And what did they do to Parler?
They told Parler that they violated the terms of service of the servers and they booted them off of the servers and said, you need to go find someplace else. There are not very many server companies out there that can handle the size of traffic that a Twitter can handle.
Yeah.
There is one that Truth Social is using. And it's an interesting one, but it's a lot of money to operate server farms like that. Electricity alone is just a massive bill. And then you're building these all over the world so that you have safety, and you're dealing with security, and you're dealing with IT security. And I say security of, what if somebody tries to actually physically attack a server farm, right? Somebody could try to blow up the servers where Twitter is based, or Facebook is based, or anything else. I'm not advocating for that, just so everybody is clear.
No, but it would make sense, right? If you do own these, if I don't own any server farms, but if I did, I'd be talking to the Israelis. I'd be purchasing some Iron Dome systems, right? And putting them right next to my server fields.
And then there's just the cost of operating. I know one company, this is a middle tier server company. They were paying $30 million for a 10-year lease on the buildings that included the energy bills, but $30 million for 10 years, $3 million a year just for the buildings that didn't include the servers and all of the electronics that went inside of it. These are enormous cost centers. And Amazon has built the largest infrastructure of any company out there, that they're really the only ones who can handle a Facebook or a Twitter.
So in theory, is it possible? And I've seen no evidence of this. I'm just asking, is it possible when Elon Musk takes over Twitter, and however he runs it, if the leftists at Amazon say, we don't like what Elon Musk and his new Twitter team are doing, could they say, we're kicking Twitter, the entire thing, we're kicking you off of our servers?
Yes, it's possible. They would be asking for a lawsuit, right? It's one thing to go against Parler, who was not a huge company with a huge funding, a huge amount of capital.
Right.
It's another thing to go after Twitter and Elon Musk and say, hey, we're going to take this tiny little thing in our terms and conditions and say you violated it. Yeah. He would go after them with every attorney he could find, and it would be a lot harder. Now, that said, I still think that would have been a better investment. I would have loved to see what could Elon Musk have done from an innovation standpoint, similar to Starlink. As for those who don't know, Starlink is his new satellite system to provide Wi-Fi, to provide wireless internet, which all of this goes back to our conversation about capitalism. You have all of these people for the last 10 years advocating for, we need to make internet a public utility because it's not available to people in rural areas.
Right.
Elon Musk is solving that. He has built Starlink. We saw him turn on the Russians knocked out all the towers of Ukrainians for their Wi-Fi at the very beginning of this. He immediately turned Starlink on, got routers out to everybody, and all of a sudden everyone had super fast internet in a heartbeat. He also announced yesterday that all Hawaiian Airlines, this is just going to be a little test run. Anybody flying Hawaiian Airlines will have free access to internet on their flights, just as a little test run. But this is going to be
good excuse
what
to
he
Hawaii.
thinks is the future of the internet, of internet access. To have that, it shows how he can innovate. I would have loved him to innovate in the server space to remove that barrier from competition to come in. I think the last thing that we should be looking at in all of this is what are the questions? Where does this go? What do we see the differences as? And we've seen Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and TikTok and all of these things start getting pulled into Congress, in front of Congress to talk about what social media looks like and how it should work. I'm really curious to see how Musk changes that dynamic, right? When you had Jack Dorsey, who I don't know if anybody remembers, there's something about Jack Dorsey that's always bothered me. And I never really understood.
He was the founder.
He was
right?
the founder of Twitter,
yes.
and was the CEO until about a year and a half ago. They replaced him with Parag Agrawal, who is now supposedly staying on, at least for the moment. Musk isn't looking to go in and just totally change everything, but he's the CEO now. Jack Dorsey just looked like he didn't care. And he didn't care about the business being successful. He didn't care about making it a good business. He wanted it to be what it was. Now, Jack Dorsey has, since getting thrown off the board, has since changed his tune. He's become very negative about Twitter. He's become very negative about what it's become. He's talked about how he wanted it to be a public square and how he wanted it to be a place for open dialogue. Now, that wasn't the case when he was running it.
Right.
So who knows what he really thinks. But there was something about when you'd watch Dorsey and Zuckerberg and some of these other guys being hauled in front of Congress, they just didn't seem like they cared about their shareholders. They didn't seem to care about the business itself. They had other alternative interests in mind that they just wanted to go do harmful things.
Is it that, and you might be right, I wonder, is it that they don't really care about their business and their shareholders and all that? Or is it they don't care about Congress and they walk in there with just sort of contempt of how and here maybe I'm juxtaposing real life, progressive billionaires with someone like Tony Stark, in the Iron Man series, when he gets drugged before Congress, he just has complete contempt. You're like, how dare you waste my time?
It's interesting you bring up Tony Stark. In the second Iron Man, Elon Musk makes a cameo.
Oh, I forgot about that.
When they're at the Monaco Grand Prix.
Okay.
And he's there, and there have been for years people have said that the Robert Downey Jr. character of Iron Man is actually Elon Musk.
Yeah.
That they use Elon Musk as their caricature of what they wanted.
Yeah.
What they wanted Iron Man to be. I think it's a contempt for the process more than it's a contempt for Congress. And I say that because I think they were so crony and so far in bed with so many members of Congress that they knew none of it mattered. They knew none of what they said mattered. All they had to do was make sure they don't say anything that gets them in trouble, gets them sued by their shareholders or anything like that, and that they didn't cost the company any of their stock price, and just get through it.
Yeah.
I think Elon Musk goes in with a different attitude. And you saw Dorsey and Zuckerberg and the rest very much on the same page, right? It was them. It was the new CEOs at Google, who I'm forgetting names all of a sudden, but you saw these guys all going in on the same team. Musk is going to disrupt that. And the biggest conversation, I'm curious to see where he goes with this, is Section 230. Yeah. And that's something we haven't talked about. I've actually, I went looking. I cannot find anything on the record about what Elon Musk has said or thought about Section 230, which is really interesting because he seems to have an open mouth about everything else.
Right.
And I didn't find anything. Now, if any of our members can find anything, I would love to see it. Please share it in the comments. And maybe I was looking in the wrong places, but I haven't seen anything of what he thinks about Section 230. And that's going to become a major part of the conversation, especially as we approach the 22 election.
And that's another topic that warrants more conversation. We might address that. You might address that in your new spinoff podcast. Also, we had mentioned earlier too. We still need to have this conversation. We have a new justice has been added to the United States Supreme Court, and she doesn't know. Now, Dave, you thought I was going to say she doesn't know what a woman is or how to. That's not what I'm going to say.
She doesn't.
She also does not know if human beings have natural rights, and so there's a lot to say about that because it raises these huge questions. If we don't have natural rights, then what is the purpose of government? What is the purpose of law? What's the purpose of the Supreme Court if we don't actually have individual natural rights? And that same subject, we're seeing, the importance of it as crime waves are spiking across the United States, including here where we are. We've been victim to some recent crime ourselves, and what that means for law enforcement, what it says about the United States together, all together as a larger culture. There's a lot of topics that are worth exploring in some more depth, but I think we're going to have to wait for next time.
Yeah, just a couple quick comments on that. I do think it's really important to understand that if we have no natural rights, where does the right to private property come from? And private property is still the foundation of this. You talked about we've been victims of some things ourselves. For those who are listening, this is podcast 100. Yeah. Those who were listening 6 to 8 months ago, they'll remember me talking about I was burgled twice. Somebody came into my garage and on 2 different occasions, and then just this past weekend, my car was parked in the Denver Tech Center in a garage. I was at lunch and somebody came over, smashed in my window and stole from me.
Including a lot of equipment belonging to the Vino and Veritas Society.
If anything does look different to people this time, we're actually using some different equipment because one of our cameras was in that bag, was stolen among my computer and several other things. The bigger part of that is things have gotten so bad that the police said to me, we're really sorry, and we know this is a big deal. We're not trying to downplay the importance of that stuff to you, but we've got domestic violence cases that we can't keep up with. We've got suicide attempts that we can't keep up with. And it turns out over this past weekend, just 24 hours after I went over to the location where we believe the thief was based, there was a murder. There was a shooting a block away. There's some really bad things happening in our country right now that we need to understand. If we have no natural rights and no right to private property, and the government's job is not to protect it, where does that take us?
Well, it takes us to a place where government doesn't do what it's supposed to do, and citizens don't exercise the virtues they're supposed to exercise. And truthfully, that's why the Vino and Veritas Society exists, to remind Americans what government is supposed to be doing and the virtues that citizens are supposed to be exercising. And we're gonna dig back into those subjects here in an upcoming discussion.
Looking forward to it. Until then, we'll continue to be the guardians of the American idea.
No sumos custodes.